a minute. I'll give you a warning a minute out, Carolyn. Thank you. Go ahead.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to share a few slides to keep me going, and we're good. So yeah, I work for Cumbria CVS, and we're an organisation that supports voluntary and community sector organisations across the whole of Cumbria. So first off, to give you a feel for kind of the scale of the voluntary and community sector and the range of organisations that are in it, there's a map of Cumbria divided into the old council areas, but the red line down the middle is the new ones. And in Cumberland Council's area, nearly 1,000 voluntary and community sector organisations. In Westmoreland and Furness, a bit over 1,000. So really big sector. The biggest of those organisations are organisations like hospices, housing associations. The smallest are things like village halls, sports clubs, and support groups of various kinds. So most of those organisations probably have relatively little understanding of climate issues over and above what any member of the public has. So I've tried to divide it into kind of 3 groups of organisations. I think there will be some voluntary and community sector organisations that have a really strong interest in climate change because that's the core of their work. So some big national organisations that are names everybody will know, people like Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion. Some organisations that work across the whole of Cumbria, like Cumbria Action for Sustainability, and some really small community-based sustainability groups. So just as an example, organisations like Ambleside Action for a Future. I think there'll be some voluntary and community sector organisations that have an interest because they've seen the impacts of climate change. So in Cumbria, most of us have seen the impacts of flooding. Again, in Cumbria-wide organisations that work with the environment, like Cumbria Wildlife Trust, will have seen many of those impacts of climate change. And organisations like housing associations have seen the impacts of flooding on the properties they own. And again, right down at a community level, flood action groups, mountain rescue teams, community groups that have been involved in that flood response. But I think many voluntary and community sector organisations probably really haven't thought much about climate change. They're busy doing what I would say call their day job. So that could be anything from providing care services to running a sports club to working with young people. And because these groups are often run by volunteers, they're busy flat out fundraising, finding volunteers, filling in all the paperwork that goes with running an organisation. So how might you go about influencing those voluntary and community sector organisations? Some of it's going to depend on the type of group and their structure. So it might be by becoming a member of the organisation. It might be by interacting with them on social media. But I think I'd say for the bulk of the organisations in the voluntary and community sector, it might be about taking small steps to raising their awareness about climate change and its importance. So maybe think about what's important to them as an organisation, how it links to the kind of work they do on a day-to-day basis, and maybe find out who makes the decisions, because that does vary quite a lot from organisation to organisation. For some voluntary and community sector organisations, it will be the trustee board who makes most of the decisions. For some organisations, they're a membership organisation, and anyone who joins that organisation has a big say. And probably fairly similar to one of the points David made, the other people who have a lot of influence over voluntary and community sector organisations are the organisations who fund them. So sometimes that's the public as the people they get donations from, but sometimes it's about grant-making organisations who can put requirements on those organisations when they apply for funding.
Just under a minute.
So I think that, yeah, I think I am pretty much done, Jenny. So I'll stop sharing that screen.
Thank you. That's brilliant.